What's going on, guys? Joe Morgan here with Sporting News with Sabrina Merchant, live from Staples Center. Clippers drop one to the Jazz, 120-107. They fall to 23-11. Interesting game, quite frankly. Clippers jumped out to a lead in the first, quickly gave it up. It definitely was a game of runs. Close game in the fourth, entering the fourth, and Utah found a way to pull away. Donovan Mitchell had another great game here against the Clippers. But I think most importantly, and what Sabrina, I think you both and I noticed here, was the absence of Montrezl Harrell. We were notified pretty shortly before the game that he was going to be out with flu-like symptoms, and they really missed him. I have no problem saying at this point that he might be the third most important guy on this team, and from watching tonight, I think we could really tell that the Clippers needed him and missed him at many points.
Right, absolutely. So Ivica Zubac usually averages about 18 minutes a game for this Clippers team. He got stretched into 27, and I think you could tell down the stretch he was just a little tired.
Yep.
I mean, part of that is going up against Rudy Gobert, who's a big, physical guy. It's a hard center to play against. And then part of that, I think that's extra workload that he hasn't been tasked with this season. And you could see that stress, it sort of affected all the Clippers at the end of the game. They just didn't have it, whereas Utah executed much better than they did in the fourth quarter.
And Zoo was great in that first. I think he tied his career high with 12. But as you and I are kind of talking about before we did this, is it's hard to expect Zoo to produce and play that many minutes. And there's no doubt in my mind that he got tired at the end. Montrez is so important to this team, especially with obviously that Lou Will pick and roll. But even just, quite frankly, the energy and attitude that he brings off the bench, I could feel that. So when that bench unit came in, it didn't have that same kind of pop. And Montrez, which honestly, this is surprising for me to even say now that as we've moved along, he's instant offense off the bench, and that's not something I thought I'd ever say in my life.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, how Trez has, made it so that he's not dependent on that Lou Trez pick and roll anymore. It seemed like today Lou is very much dependent on that action because he was a little out of sorts playing with Patrick Patterson and JaMychal Green as those bigs because they just pop. I mean, he wanted to have action roll into the basket, and these guys just want to space around the three-point line. And that second unit, like you said, it just felt a little lethargic. It
felt a little lethargic.
Yeah.
That's the right word. And, I think something that the Clippers, and this is for the future, obviously, but I think something the Clippers should be looking at as we get closer to the trade deadline is if Trez is out, you're definitely missing something in the middle. And Zoo's great, but he's still young. He's not ready for those minutes. I'm curious to see if the Clippers make some kind of move to get another big in there, because I do think once we get into postseason play and deeper into the season, the question is going to be, can Trez handle some of the bigs like a Rudy Gobert, or if, let's say way deep in the future like a Giannis or an Embiid? And I think the answer is I would not be that comfortable with Montrez because he's undersized, and obviously what he brings is fantastic. But I do think at some point they might have to look to make a move.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you never want to plan for the fact that Trez is going to miss a game because this is the first game he's missed since the 2017 Asian season, right? He's generally a very durable guy. But I mean, we talk about JaMychal Green being this potential stretch five option for the Clippers, maybe being able to bring Rudy Gobert away from the basket. I didn't see a lot of that today from JaMychal. I didn't see that from Patrick Patterson. That stretch five option was not there. They needed a real five, and without Trez, they just didn't have it for 48 minutes.
Well, and then on top of that, if you're going to have Paul George and Kawhi shoot as poorly as they did, what were they, 12 of 44 from the field? I mean, it was brutal. And there were shots that Kawhi was missing in the fourth quarter that we rarely see him miss. Paul George has struggled as of late with his shot. I think if they're going to shoot that way and you're not going to have Trez, you're going to lose a lot of ball games. They need to find somebody else in those moments, and Lou also wasn't able to do that today.
Right. It's so strange because you think the Clippers have so much star power. Yes, they're down Montrezl Harrell, but we talk about him as the Clippers' third most important player, right? Paul George and Kawhi have to step up, and Doc said that there's a flu going around the locker room. Kawhi didn't look. I mean, I thought he looked pretty bouncy in the first half, frankly. His jumper wasn't going in, but
I didn't see any kind of illness situation.
Right. But he was missing a ton of shots around the rim in the second half. He wasn't even trying to take jump shots later on in the game. And like you said with Paul George, that's been a situation for the last 4 games or so where he hasn't been connecting. I mean, Clippers have depth, but first, second, and third best players not performing. This is what the kind of situation.
And your third's out, you're going to lose. Yes. Donovan Mitchell, another huge game against the Clippers. It's funny, I was in that end of that first quarter, I looked up and I was like, is Donovan Mitchell even playing in this game? I think he had 6 points. He winds up with, what do you have, 30? Mitchell went off. He's killed the Clippers. And I'm not quite sure why it was such a great defensive team.
Yeah, he averages 30 points against the Clippers this season. He was great in the last home game. He was great in Utah when the two teams played. It is very strange because the Clippers are such a good defensive team, and their strength is their perimeter defense.
Right.
You think they'd be very well equipped to handle a guy like Donovan Mitchell, especially after, watching that Christmas Day game where they just neutralized LeBron James.
Right.
Something about Mitchell, he's a little bit smaller, a little bit quicker. Kawhi didn't seem to have any answers for him. They put Rodney Magruder on him. That didn't work. They put Landry Shamet on him. Donovan was eating those up.
Yeah,
he was calling for the switches
Yeah.
on Landry Shamet. He just said that he feels very comfortable in this matchup.
I don't know why that is.
He doesn't really know why either, but he's going to keep attacking it as long as that advantage exists.
Sure, Doc will love that answer. I do think he hit some tough shots, by the way. I know we talk about guys getting hot against certain teams. He hit some really tough shots in this game, so you got to tip your cap to Donovan. One other thing to note, Beverly did leave the game with an injured elbow. We're not quite sure what's going on yet. No x-rays are okay, though.
He had his wrist wrapped up. He seemed to be constantly touching it when he came back into the game in the fourth quarter. He even blocked a shot with that hand, which I thought was very surprising, but then almost immediately asked out.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that.
Definitely something to keep an eye on, the heart and soul of this team. So we'll keep you posted on that. But Clippers do lose one here at home to the Jazz, 120-107. They fall to 23-11. This is Joe Morgan and Sabrina Merchant. Excuse me, I got to be using their last name, from Staples Center.